Hi, gang. Welcome to this discussion about perk tests, septic systems, and what we're doing in today's world in relation to getting perk tests for our customers and getting these lots sold, because this is obviously a common question. Perk is short for percolation, and that describes underneath the drain field of a septic system, which is illustrated here, how well the soil will let water flow away. We have there's a number of situations in the world where out of the septic system, the soil is not water absorbent, and that causes all kinds of problems making the septic tank not work. Number one is maybe the groundwater is too shallow right up against this box. Maybe the soil underneath the drain field is too dense. Happens sometimes with clay or tons of rock. Or sometimes it has seasonal high water that is up and down. And for all these different reasons, sometimes the soil does not drain adequately. So to understand that better, let's talk about a whole septic system and what exactly happens. So funny little joke we always tell when we're talking about plumbing is poop don't flow uphill. That's the number one thing you need to know. So what happens is things come out of the house, liquids and solids come from the kitchen sink, come from the garbage disposal, come from the toilets, showers, into the septic tank. This is the septic tank demonstrated here. And what happens is water and solids fall out of this pipe. You can see this down pipe here. The solids that are heavier than water collect on the bottom. Fat and other materials that are lighter than water float up, and then water and untreated sewage is basically here. And you can see this inflow pipe is slightly higher than this outflow pipe, so it comes over here again. Whatever little solids are left fall out again, and then eventually water flows out here to a distribution box. Overhead, you can't see this in this drawing, but maybe this is 4 or 5 different perforated pipes laid into a bed of gravel. Sometimes it's one very wide perforated pipe on one bed of gravel. Sometimes these are individual trenches, like I said, but this is a side view, so it's not showing that. Maybe we can show a different view here shortly. Maybe not, really not that important to the conversation for the perk testing situation. But again, the reason why a lot's soil may not be suitable for a septic system of a traditional type, which this is what we call a traditional septic. It's all gravity fed, no pumps, no special technology, is that there would be some problem with the water that flows out of the septic tank into this gravel field not draining adequately. In this case, it's drawn in a way that it is draining adequately. In much of the areas that we work, the soil is very sandy, and it is excellent for this situation. The groundwater is over 50 feet deep, so there's not a problem with that. The soil layers are mostly sand, so there's plenty of absorption and purification before it ever gets down to the groundwater. So in any event, those are the reasons why it may not perk. So when someone says, I need a perk test, that's entirely different from what DHEC offers. A perk test is a person comes out and performs a perk test, and they are studying the soil to see if they can determine any reason why perhaps the soil might not be adequately drained. And the things that they do to determine that is, number one, they look at the plant life on the ground. Sometimes certain plants grow only where it's wet. If it's obviously wet, then that's not going to work, because we're trying to get water to drain away, not stay in the drain field. That will be the first step they might look at. The second step they might look at is how sloped is the area. If you're in a very sloped situation, that doesn't mean you can't get a septic tank to work, but sometimes you have to have a special design where the drain field has to run across the slope. You definitely would not want it downhill. As you can see in this drawing, the drain pipe is very, very level. And that's what you want, because this is perforated and you want it to drain out all down the drain field. You don't want it to all collect here. You don't want these to get clogged and then it all to drain out here. You want it to be nice and level so that it evenly distributes throughout the drain field so that it can absorb into the soil. adequately. So the next thing they'll do is they have a special auger, and they'll take this hand auger, and it's usually typically 3 to 4 feet long, and it has a thread on the outside, and they'll twist it into the ground, and they pull out a core sample of the soil. Then they'll look at that core sample, and they'll look for different things. Number one, is there any water in the bottom of the hole? That's a big problem. Obviously, if water's standing in the hole, then that means then the groundwater table is pretty high. They'll also look for stripes in the soil of rust or other strata, which determine to them that it is it has seasonal high water, and that there may be problems from time to time with soil absorption. So that's what's involved with the PERC test. Now in South Carolina, it used to be that when you applied for a permit to construct septic with DHEC, that part of that was that DHEC would come out and perform the PERC test. Then they would examine the site, examine the potential site plan, where the house is going to lay, where the potential well is going to be, where the septic tank should go, and then they would design you a system, and that whole process would cost $150. And part of that was the technician coming into the field and actually testing the soil to see if it was adequate. In the context of a larger development, DHEC has taken the stance that they're not going to do it anymore, and they require that to be done by a licensed soil scientist. And we have used a variety of those since that change. The licensed soil scientist is typically $900 to $1,400 to get them to come out and perform this test. Obviously much more expensive than DHEC. And then they will work with DHEC to design the most appropriate septic system and get the license to or the permit to construct septic. Obviously, in order to get a building permit, the building official needs to know that you can get septic. So a lot of times they apply, or they make you apply and get that permit before you begin construction, that sort of thing. So in the context of our buyers, it becomes very important to know, will this lot perk? How do I know that it's going to perk? Okay, well, most of our traditional sales are contingent upon a perk test, especially if the person is represented by an agent. Sometimes it's a condition of the sale and sometimes not. We will almost always guarantee that our lots will perk because myself and our partners typically verify that the soil is of a type that will perk before we ever begin subdividing land. So we're quite comfortable through our experience, the locations that we operate in, and certain consultants that we may call in, that this soil is going to perk. What happens if it doesn't perk for a traditional septic system? There are a number of alternative septic systems that can be installed. They're just considerably more pricey. In the Midlands of South Carolina, where we typically work, that would be Aiken County, Lexington County, parts of Richland County, parts of Sumter County, parts of Lee, Kershaw, Florence, Darlington, Hartsville counties, or Darlington counties, is very, very sandy soil. And so we're pretty comfortable that they're going to perk. However, in the event that you find a place where they might not perk, there are what they call engineered or specially designed alternative septic systems that can be used. Number one is a 3-tank system where each tank has a treatment technique, and then when it pumps out, the water is almost clear. Another system would have a traditional septic tank with a pump system on it, and then they'll have a mound on top of the ground where the drainage would take place from, instead of subterranean like as you see here. So there are alternatives, but our clients typically don't want that if they can avoid it, because those systems can be quite costly. In the Midlands of South Carolina, a typical system like this might cost between $4,000 and $7,000, whereas a engineered system might be $25,000 or more. Typically, you're going to find those around lakes or areas where the property values are much, much higher, and it's worth it to go ahead and pay the extra for a engineered or specialized septic system. So how do we handle it in the sales process? Person comes out and says, has it been perked? No, it has not been perked, but we need to make sure that they understand that what they're asking for is a percolation test, not a permit to construct septic. In order to get a permit to construct septic, they need to know what size home they're going to build and where it's going to be on the lot. Typically, the larger the lot, the better chance you have of finding a spot that will perk. Usually perk problems come in very small sites where they just don't have anywhere to put a septic system, and if it won't work in that spot, then they're stuck. So that typically happens around Lake Murray in our case, or along a river where it's a small lot. You know, when you're dealing with 5-7 acres out in the country, the person has a lot of options of where to put the septic system. Now, you might ask yourself, well, what happens if where they want to put their house, they can't get it to perk, but it will perk somewhere else on the lot? That's real simple. They may have a collection box like this, and then another pump box that will pump to yet another collection box just like this. So there would be a 2-box system, and then it would go to a drain field in a spot on the lot where it will perk. Typically that system is called a LETS system. And they can also do this where it drains to a collection box, and then maybe if there's sewer along the road, but the house is downhill, then the sewer can pump, or they'll have a collection box and then a pump that would pump uphill to city sewer if that's along the road. Or in the case of a septic system, maybe the drain field is uphill. So there are lots of options, but what's important is how we work with our clients and our customers and let them know that we're going to work with them to make sure that they get what they need. If we're very comfortable that it is going to perk, then we'll just simply give them a written guarantee that if they will get a perk test within a year. If it fails to perk, then we'll just buy the lot back from them. Our owner financing customers, this is even easier still because they don't have a lot of skin in the game. But even if they've paid cash for it, then usually we'll give them a 1-year guarantee that we'll buy it back from them if it doesn't perk. I think that's pretty much everything that needs to be covered in this video. Jeremy, do you have anything else on that?
No, I think it's just more questions coming from the buyer, being that they're not being represented sometimes, and they're just making sure that they can get a home on the lot.
Yep.
I think we pretty much can guarantee that.
Yeah, we can guarantee it. Obviously, we would rather they go ahead and take the initiative now to get it perked. But sometimes they just don't want to pay for that now. They don't want to make the decision where the house is going to be on the lot yet. They don't exactly have their plan worked out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One other note, when it comes to septic systems, almost all of our properties are going to be septic, and we will not let a homeowner or a buyer occupy the property with any sort of dwelling until they hook to septic, and that includes campers. So if somebody is going to build a home, but they're moving a camper to the lot or a single wide to the lot while they're under construction, they cannot simply use the tank that's built into the camper and have it pumped occasionally, because we all know they won't. They have to install a permitted and inspected septic system that is approved by the county and DHEC. We have some liability in that case, especially if we still own the lot by the deed, being that they're on owner financing. And also, it's just gross. So they need to have a septic system installed before they can dwell on the property. I think that covers it for this video. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in depth outside of this scope.